a sign of a nervous system that is, some people call it rigid or inflexible or delicate or vulnerable, meaning when you say easily overwhelmed, the capacity in their system is so diminished that even the smallest ask or the smallest barrier to overcome feels to the system so big. And sometimes, some of the impacts of a shutdown system, brain fog, a lot of cognitive functioning becomes a lot more difficult in a shutdown state and an activated state.
Eliza, I'm so excited to have you here today. You completely blew my mind when I heard you speak all about the nervous system. And I just I remember being like, you have to come on the show. We need to talk about this. I feel like
you.
my community could really appreciate and learn from the work that you're doing around this. So first of all, for those who don't know what the nervous system is, I think that's because a lot of people know what mindset is, and they understand mindset and some of these other terms that I feel like we get stuck in trying to fix things and it doesn't really, nothing changes.
Yeah.
But the nervous system is really important. So what is that?
I love that you asked that because even when I was being trained in the nervous system, there's this assumption that we know what that means. And I remember sitting in the room going, is it just me? What do we mean? What are we talking about when we say nervous system? Like, where is that? What is that? Right. And so just high level, when we're saying the nervous system, we're actually talking about the brain stem and spinal cord, so where the brain stem connects to the spinal cord, and then all of the nerve endings and the sort of the bundle of nerves that comes off of the brain and spinal cord and flows throughout the entire body. And the reason why that's interesting is because the way I like to describe it is that it's the information superhighway. That system, brain stem, spinal cord, and all the nerve endings, that's the superhighway that sends all of the information back and forth between your brain and body. So everything that comes through, all information, all of your thoughts, your feelings, your beliefs, all your aches, your pains, your whether it's too hot, too cold, whether you like it, whether you don't like it, if it hurts, if it doesn't hurt, all of that information all day long is being sent through your nervous system through that information superhighway. So really, when you think about it, it is the control panel for everything you think, feel, say, and do in your life. To bring it all the way back to a simple sentence, your nervous system is your control panel. It controls everything about you, which blew my mind when I learned about it.
And so I tend to think about the nervous system in kind of two states. So we talk a lot about the fight or flight, rest and digest, sympathetic versus parasympathetic.
Mm-hmm.
And yet I learned from you, which was a huge aha, because I had to go through anatomy and physiology and all of this stuff that we talk about in my master's degree and all of this education, that there's two parts to this system, but that's not entirely the whole story. So can you talk a little bit about what those are, and then what would be a better way to view this, a more complete way to view the different pieces of your nervous system?
Yeah. So Dr. Stephen Porges is the pioneer in this part or this anatomy of the nervous system. And his big discovery, and he's been researching this for half a century now, it's been 50 years, but you know how research goes. And first you have an idea, and then you got to get funding, and then you got to research it, and then there's got to be peer-reviewed papers, and then people have to, it takes a long time for something to actually become, quote, mainstream. So he's been researching this for about 50 years. And what he discovered, and he discovered it through neonatal intensive care work with infants, is that there's actually two branches of our parasympathetic system. And it's really important that we know that, because what people know as the parasympathetic is the rest and digest, right? That's how most people know the parasympathetic. But the opposite side, the other branch of the parasympathetic, is actually our shutdown state. So it's called dorsal vagal, but it's our shutdown state. So one side of the parasympathetic is rest, digest. It's where, a lot of health and vitality is. But the other side of the parasympathetic state is actually a very protective state, so much so that it is the state that we're in, when we are overwhelmed, when we have to leave a situation, when the body wants to take us out of a situation. It's severe, right? It's the path of last resort, right? And so they're almost polar opposites of each other. One is health and vitality. The other one is I'm in so much danger that I have to shut all the way down. So when we talk about parasympathetic, it's really important to know that there's two sides of that coin. And so, when you were saying, well, what's a better way to describe it? When I'm talking about our nervous system states, I like to think about it as load, as sort of protective load. And here's what I mean by that. We've got the state of rest and digest, where let's call it health and vitality, right? But then we start to pick up a danger in the environment. The nervous system starts to detect some threat in the environment, and it starts to build some energy in the system. So now we've got this load building. We've got some energy going to protect ourselves from whatever it is. And if that load gets to be too much to bear, then we get to a shutdown system. So it's this progression of load on the system. It's similar to allostatic load. So when we are overwhelmed with stress, the response to that is actually to shut down. And so a different way to look at the states of the nervous system would be, well, how much load is on the system and how is the system responding? When there's too much load and we can't deal with it, then it will actually shut down. And so it's almost this progression of allostatic load in the system.
This episode is brought to you by my skincare line, Dermaquell. The beauty of these skincare products are that they are especially crafted for those struggling with chronic skin rash issues based on my research and clinical experience from my private practice. They focus on organic ingredients that are clean like zinc, aloe, and hemp oil that support and calm rashed, dry, angry skin. There's no unnecessary chemicals or additives that can further dry out your skin or mess with your hormones. And I'm so excited for you to add these creams into your routine. Check them out at quellshop.com and use the coupon code GET15OFF to get 15% off your first order. I'll put a link in the description below. And now let's jump back to the video. So I want to clarify for everyone a couple of things. So first of all, when you say like there's this extreme amount of overwhelm, I can say that, and I know for sure just from going through some exercises, and they were powerful that you had us do in the presentation that I saw, that I have experienced this like total shutdown without like some catastrophic thing happening. So it didn't need to be like somebody died. So there was a horrific car accident. I literally got to a place where there were just too many things happening. And I couldn't, I just went within, and it was like several days. And my husband, of course, because he knows me so well, was like, what's going on? Because you are abnormally quiet. You're abnormally withdrawn.
That's right.
Like your energy is just like low.
Yes. Yeah.
So I think that's important for people to know. And this is the way my brain is thinking about this, just from like, so you tell me if I'm wrong in this. So obviously we have the sympathetic nervous system, which is our fight or flight. So is it sort of like where if you're in the parasympathetic, the happy, like healthy, like chill, relaxed state, things start happening. Your body starts to be like, ooh, I sense some sort of danger. It could be from food. It could be from an infection. It could be from any number of things. And do we start to transition potentially to a sympathetic state? And then the load gets to a place where you just can't bear it anymore, or maybe you don't have the tools to process it, and that your body's like, nope. And it switches over to that dorsal vagal, like shutdown state.
Shutdown. That's a great way to explain it. And I love that you bring that up, actually, because that's another misconception that people have with the nervous system is that, fight or flight means someone's actually coming at me and I'm actually having to fight them. Not at all. And that shutdown means that, oh my gosh, it's so much, someone must have died or something catastrophic must have happened. Also, not at all. So I love that you brought that up. Yes, when those catastrophic things happen, absolutely our system responds that way. However, what you're describing is more accurate, which is our systems are designed to move back and forth between these states all day long, actually. And so, for example, like you were saying, maybe you wake up, you're going right along, it's a beautiful day, the sun is shining, and then let's just say you get an annoying email, right? Something that is frustrating, a little bit of load in the system, right? A little bit of frustration in the system. And your system is designed to have that frustration. Maybe you respond and then go back to a more, a more connected and safe state, right? However, if you keep getting those emails and your day keeps getting stressors come into the environment, whether that's noises, sights, sounds, like you said, are there aches and pains? Is it inside the body? Is it something that you ate? Are there toxins? Whatever it is. If you keep getting this load on the system and you're not, and you don't have the tools, or maybe you don't even realize that it's happening because you haven't done any work to identify your nervous system state. So you don't even know it's happening. You think you're just, it's just life. It's just stressful, right? But that is a load on the system. And once your system gets to a point where, man, that's one too many stressors, one too many inputs, whether it be, just a loud noise that takes you over the edge, or one more email that takes you over the edge, as you were describing, can be as simple as I'm not talking anymore. I'm shutting down. I can't have the same type of conversation with you anymore. So it's not always this dramatic or traumatic experience. It is actually just the way that as human beings, we are moving each day through society. And so when what you're describing was the progression of your nervous system through a certain level of activation or overwhelm until it said, you know what, that's enough for now. We got to shut it down because I don't have the capacity to handle what's going on here. And I think I love that you point that out, because it's really important for people to understand that this is a physiological response from the body. So it's not a choice. We're not talking mental health. That's one of the things that, I'm a therapist. I'm a clinically trained therapist. And I don't love the way that we assume that the progression of something like that is about mental health, as in, well, you just can't handle difficult situations, or you just can't handle stress. This is about the physiology and the way that our physiology was developed, and the progression of how we move through our different nervous system states. So it is happening for everyone. There are no exceptions. Children, adults, of every age, from birth all the way through, our physiology responds to our environment this way.
And is this why someone who, so a lot of my listeners have usually at least some sort of skin issue going on, or they're a caregiver, or sometimes they're just interested in this topic. But a lot of times there's some type of personal connection to a pretty chronic, sometimes very life-altering skin problem that could be in conjunction with other like comorbidities and other, health challenges. And for some, it could be like, oh, I don't, the patches on my skin really bother me. I have some itching. I don't like the way they look. For others, it is, I would argue, depending on the severity, for some it's catastrophic because of the severity of what they're experiencing. Yeah. And a lot of times, like when I am in like these Facebook groups and even in my own community, sometimes there's a lot happening. People may be in a moldy environment. They may be like, also what we consume can also be overwhelming, right? From not just the food, but from an information perspective and the world. We'll just leave it at that. The world can feel very overwhelming. Family issues, personal struggles, work stressors, and maybe not even being able to work. And some individuals get to a point where they they're like in a really, really bad place.
Yeah.
And a lot of people on the outside just go, oh, you have a mindset problem. Oh, you're just
Mm,
depressed.
yeah.
But is it possible that it's not just, I mean, I don't want to demean or put down like a mental health diagnosis by any stretch of the imagination, but there are times when I'm talking to someone and I'm like, your nervous system is
Yeah.
like this is not just maybe a mental health condition. Like this is almost like what's going on with your nervous system?
Yeah. Yes. Well, as as you heard me talk about this, after having been trained, so over 20 years in classically trained clinical psychology, right? So diagnoses and everything in between. And then, the few years, right? The last few years being very well trained in the nervous system terminology, physiology, and how that fits into the clinical picture. And I can say with confidence that this was the missing piece for clinical work with my clients because of exactly what you're talking about. Our capacity, our ability to face stressors, to have stressors in our lives, whether that be from a physical condition or an emotional condition or the combination thereof, is dependent on the health and flexibility of our nervous system. It starts there. That is where it starts. And by that, I mean, sometimes when people will say, well, we just need to do mindset work, just power of positive thinking, things like that. For example, I will tell you that,
I'm rolling
yes,
my eyes
you're
because I'm just
having
like,
emotions. Yes. All the feels. Because I will say, one of the things that we realized when we started using the physiology of the nervous system is that people's ability to access the executive functioning skills. So, our ability to access the cognitive skills that are required for positive thinking. There are cognitive skills that are required for positive thinking. Our ability to access those skills depends on which nervous system state we're in. So, if you are someone who is consistently activated or shut down, you don't have access to think your way through it, to just change your mindset or even your beliefs at that point. Your nervous system dictates all of that. So until we are in we'll call it, so it's your ventral vagal parasympathetic system. That is the scientific nomenclature. And what does that mean? We'll just call it our system of safety and connection. Until we are in a flavor of our system of safety and connection, we don't have access to those thoughts, beliefs, the systems that would allow us to mindset our way out of it. It's not even there. And we saw this in kids, is that they have what we dubbed hot system dominance. So they're in this constant hypervigilance, right? They're in this constant state of activation. And then we would say, well, just try to calm down, right? Or take a breath or be positive. And they can't do it. And people would think that it's some type of mental health failure on their part. And the research showed us they don't have access to the brain structures, the parts of our brain that light up or that are firing when we have access to that part of the prefrontal cortex that is involved in positive thinking and all that stuff. So I'm using a lot of the scientific nomenclature to essentially say, it's not your fault, right? If you are in consistent activation or shutdown, to be expected to then just change your mindset is ineffective at best and adding to the problem at worst.
can I ask you to? I've noticed with some clients when they get to this almost like shutdown spot, it's like their nervous system, and this is my interpretation, so if I'm wrong, it's totally okay. And I'm not, you're trained in this, I'm not. So that's why you're here. But it's sort of like they're so highly attuned and seeking safety that they almost become paralyzed because even the idea of like a simple thing like, can you just take some magnesium at night so that you can better fall asleep? Like just even simple steps, or this is the type of skincare that you want to try out or test out. Simple directions become an extreme challenge. Is this sort of what you're talking about, where someone just really struggles with follow through and can't over analyzing, really stuck, and then just easy overwhelm, shut down, can't do it, and that's that?
Yes. So what I would say is that to me is a sign of a nervous system that is, some people call it rigid or inflexible or delicate or vulnerable, meaning they're, when you say easily overwhelmed, the capacity in their system is so diminished that even the smallest ask or the smallest barrier to overcome feels to the system so big. And sometimes, some of the impacts of a shutdown system, brain fog, and a lot of cognitive functioning becomes a lot more difficult in a shutdown state and an activated state. And so in order for people to follow directions or sometimes even remember the directions that you told them, that's the thing, is so if someone's in a practitioner's office or even on a Zoom or something like that, and the practitioner is giving them instructions for what to do, if that person is in an activated state later or is receiving those instructions in an activated or shut down state, they may not be able to remember or hold that information or even remember what you said
Wow.
or how to do it, right? And so this is why I think, to me, I think you've heard me say that I think it will be the gift for humanity for people to just understand what nervous system states are, how to identify what nervous system state you're in, and then the impact that that has on your ability to function
Mhm.
in life. Because it has such a knock-on effect. You can imagine someone, like you said, take a magnesium pill, and let's say that they are just so overwhelmed or overloaded with whatever's coming into their nervous
Right.
system that now they can't take the magnesium pill, and they know somewhere, they know it's as simple as taking the magnesium pill, and I can't even do it. Well, then it compounds, it becomes this feedback loop of shame and deprecation and all that stuff. So
Exactly.
yeah.
Well, one thing I also wanted to, I think is worth mentioning is that I think the reason that we really struggle to make mindset changes is because the mindset piece, just mindset, is not a root cause problem. So we all talk about, you guys are here listening because you are interested in root cause problems. Your mindset is not a root cause problem. And so if you're listening to people on podcasts and experts telling you it's just your mindset, you got to do, here's mindset hacks, all these things, I just don't. I think we're looking for a speedy solution at a level that you really can't impact much change. You're almost like set up for disappointment and failure. And so if we're talking about, you start with the nervous system as the physiological, like the physical thing in your body, that's the basis. How do we go upward? Because mindset's in there, but nervous system impacts what?
Yes, yes. Well, and for me, this is a fascinating pathway because for me, it came out of 20 years of trial and error, mostly error, and learning the things that are involved in changing your mindset and then your behaviors. So I know a lot about this, for better or worse. So the nervous system, to oversimplify this concept, the nervous system really is the thing that shapes our beliefs about the world. It's the very first thing that shapes our beliefs about the world, because from the very beginning, as soon as we come out of the womb, the nervous system is looking always in its environment. Is this safe? Should I come closer or move further away? From infancy and until the moment we take our last breath, that's what it does. It's its entire job. And so it shapes our beliefs about the world. It shapes what we know as safe, what we know as dangerous, who we like, who we don't like, what we're good at, what we're not. Our nervous system tells us that. And out of that attunement, that shaping, come our beliefs. So the brain's job, was to put words, story, to the physiological experience that we're having. So if we're having a nervous system experience of activation or shutdown, what's the story going to sound like? The story is going to sound like, don't do that, I'm afraid, or go away from there, that's not good, or that person doesn't like me, I'm depressed, whatever it is. The story that is going to follow comes out of that nervous system state. So if you're in activation or shutdown, when that story is developed, you're going to develop one belief, versus if you're in a safe and connected state, you're going to develop another belief. So our beliefs really are the thing that create our mindset. So just to give a quick example, if you were raised in an environment where you had a critical mother who nothing was ever good enough, and you'd bring home the A and she'd say, why didn't you get extra credit? You start to formulate this belief about how it feels to be in the world. Something like, I'm not good enough, it won't ever be enough. And out of that belief comes your mindset, the mindset of what you can and can't do. So the mindset becomes, I'm someone who believes that everything is possible, or I'm someone who believes that, bad things happen to good people, right? So the mindset comes out of the beliefs. And those beliefs were created first through the nervous system. So here's where I'm going with this. If we just come in at the level of mindset and say, insert some positive thinking, I can do it, just try harder, there's opportunity for I don't know, insert whatever affirmation that someone has told you to say in there. What you're missing is that the brain and body, the combination of your brain and body are so much more powerful than this mindset affirmation that you're trying to reprogram it with, that it is always going to override something that does not fit, that is not congruent with the core beliefs and let's call it nervous system of who you are. So if it's not congruent, it's going to reject it. So we have to work at that root first, and we can realign everything, but we can't skip that step. And I think the progression of it looks something like this. Nervous system is at the very bottom. It shapes your beliefs and identity, which shapes your mindset. And the combination of those three things shape your behaviors. Your behaviors shape your outcome. So if you're looking to change anything, we can't just change at the level of behavior. I think people they'll start to change and say, well, I need to just change my behavior, or I need to just change my mindset. It's not deep enough. And oftentimes it ends up creating a more of a disconnect, because then there's shame on top, and I'm a failure, and why can't I do this? And someone told me to just change my mindset, and why doesn't it work for me? There's so much more to it. And I think the biggest takeaway is our bottom up processing. So that the information that comes from the nervous system and the beliefs to the brain is so much more powerful than our top down decisions saying, oh, I can just muscle my way through this, or my mindset my way through this. It doesn't work. We're not more powerful than this thousands and thousands of years of evolutionary biology.
Yeah. So so we know now we've got to go deeper than the mindset. So if you guys have really struggled with all this mindset stuff, you feel like it doesn't work, I'm right there with you. It's not all that effective. I think for some people, they might be in the right spot where it does help them. But I think for most people, and especially people with chronic illness, I don't think that it's all that helpful. It leads you to feeling like a failure oftentimes. So if we're going to say, all right, let's go deeper, you have this concept called state first. And we've talked about some of these states. So what is that type of approach that you're thinking of instead that could actually address this sort of more root cause nervous system area?
Yeah. Let's see if I can bring it to life, the state first approach. So if you were to walk into a coffee shop, let's say, and you were to see someone you haven't seen in a while, maybe it's someone you went to high school with, and you were to bump into each other. The state of your nervous system, so state first, the state of your nervous system will dictate how you receive everything about that person. The state of your nervous system will change how you see their face, what tones of voice that you hear coming out of their
Wow.
mouth, the words that you pick up on and filter either in or out in the sentences they say, which is kind of wild when you think of it that way.
Yeah.
So here's what's happening, and I won't go too deep into it, but there's a lot of physiology involved. So if you're in a protective state, and I'm just going to say protective state, that includes activation or shutdown. So protection will include all of that. If you're in a protective state, there's parts of your middle ear, there's parts of your senses, what you see, sight, smells, that shift because now they're oriented to a protective response. So your ear is dialed in to hear different tones in my voice. For example, right now, if you were feeling unsafe in this conversation, you would hear different tones in my voice versus if you were feeling safe, and your ear would
Wow.
pick up on different decibels and volumes and tones in my voice just based on the state that you are in. Now, if you can imagine, extrapolate that. We just talked about walking into a coffee shop and running into somebody you know. Your state is going to dictate everything about how you receive that experience. So you're going to see different facial expressions, different parts of my face differently, and all of that stuff because your body is orienting you to protection or safety. And if you think about it, if it's going to orient you to protection, then hearing soft tones in my voice and smile lines on my eyes, that's not necessary, right? So it's going to filter all of that out. And it's only going to show you and bring you the experience of me as somebody who is dangerous, right? Or a threat in some way. So when I talk about state first living, it is so important that we know what state we're in when we're in any experience because it changes how we experience the world.
Eliza, I think, and I hope that this is going to be really helpful for people because one challenge in my community is that, especially those who have gone, and you don't need to know the condition, but it's called topical steroid withdrawal. And there's a lot of loss of trust with providers who, because of it's hard to describe, so I won't go into it. People who have TSW know you got it, and we have other episodes on it. But a lot of times there's this massive distrust of the medical profession as a result of what's happened, and their health has deteriorated to the point of sometimes like a catastrophic level. And so going to the doctor is really hard because what I'm hearing is that it's not excusing. I want to be very clear here. And I think that's important for people who are in this state to know that it's not to say that this is all in your head.
I always say that.
Right?
I always make that exact statement that you just made. So
Right.
yes,
Not all
right
in your head.
Correct.
But is it possible that when you're in this place where you're so afraid, you just want help, you're like literally people are crying and asking for help, and is it possible that you could also be perceiving anything from this conversation, anything from the front desk interaction all the way back to the doctor's visit to exiting the office? You literally are also, it's hard for you to kind of process what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
And it's almost like, I don't know, it's a hard place to be in. I don't know how to describe, I don't have better words for it. I can feel emotionally how that must feel to be so stuck and lost. But what would you tell somebody who is really struggling? They need help from a provider, but they're like, clearly they're almost in like a severe, I would say, like the load is really high and sympathetic, or they're like literally in this like almost dorsal place where they're just like, I can't do it anymore. I can't even go to the doctor. I can't trust anyone. I'm so depressed. I'm so done.
Yeah. The beautiful thing about doing nervous system work and understanding the state first approach. And there's another analogy about managing our nervous system bank account, which has to do with load, like you were talking about. When you start working with these concepts, a few things happen. Number one, you can recognize which state you're in ahead of the experience, right? So even just recognizing I'm activated or close to shutdown as I'm going into this office, and I know that that means that my experience is going to be different than it would if I felt differently. So even just that awareness helps to bring some, even just a different interaction in the experience. Even just the awareness can help change it, right? And then we also, as we start to work with our nervous systems and understand our states, we also then start to understand how we move from state to state. So there's a lot of tools that we can utilize to help move us out of an activated state or out of a shutdown state, right? So then we start to brainstorm our tools and utilize our tools. As well, when I talk about managing our nervous system bank account, it's just like a bank account balance. It's not so much that we're looking at it from experience to experience. We're looking at it way before we go to the doctor's office, right? So way before we ever have that appointment. Are we putting deposits in our nervous system bank account? Are we building our capacity in our nervous system bank account? So because we know that that experience might be a big withdrawal. And so this is just one example of how when we start to work with the nervous system in a different way, it allows us to it's manage our bank account differently in anticipation of what's coming up. Or perhaps now I've left the doctor's office and I had no idea it was going to take that much from me. Well, how do I pour back in? Where am I going to put some deposits in? And so learning the whole state first approach allows us to build what we call capacity and flexibility in our system. So now when we're met with challenges, we have more capacity to deal with them. And so it becomes less of a what's going to happen in my life and more of a how do I build resilience to be able to face whatever challenges come my way.
I love that. I will also just share because I think it's helpful for listeners. So again, I got to be at your presentation. I went through some of the exercises that you shared and I found them to be profoundly helpful. And as a person who's been working with a trauma therapist for the last 2 years, there was so much insight gained because I didn't understand the shutdown state. And I don't have that experience often, but it has happened periodically. And I didn't understand not only that it was I could feel myself going there, but I didn't know how to, maybe, I don't know if stop it is the right word, but I didn't also know the tools to get out of it. And so I just got left lingering for, I don't even know, maybe 2 weeks was the most recent incident was probably earlier this year. And I just felt extremely overwhelmed. I didn't know what to do. Like I said, my husband was like, "What is wrong with you? Like, this is not you."
Yeah.
It was very apparent. And so I found those tools and then being able to better communicate when I notice I'm headed in that direction, I can verbalize it and articulate it more clearly so that he can also understand what's happening and what I actually need. Because sometimes people's support that they think is helpful is not actually helpful.
Absolutely. It's one of the most powerful places is within relationships that this work is it's so impactful the way you're describing it.
Yeah. And so I think this is important work for anybody who hears people talk about nervous system regulation and working on the nervous system. This is what we're talking about. And I want to make sure that people can connect with you because I think the work that you're doing is amazing. And you also have, I think, which would be a great tool for everybody is the nervous system toolkit. Is that correct?
Yeah. We have it's a PDF that'll kind of give the high level 101. Here's the nuts and bolts, and help people kind of orient to what is this? What are we talking about here?
Yeah.
Yes, that can absolutely, we can have that for them. And
Awesome. I think
yeah.
that's a great place to start because this is different, right? This isn't about like, how do we hack our mindset? How do we, this is different. This is the root. If you're really serious about root cause work, this is part of it.
Yeah.
Especially if your nervous system is super out of whack. I honestly think that people who the nervous system is so dysregulated, the load, as you say, is so great that, you know, if you're really struggling with protocols and you're struggling following directions, you're struggling to show up in your life, you can't take simple actions, you're afraid of everything. I think at that point you have to go, what's going on with my nervous system?
Absolutely. Without a doubt.
And I think in some regard, the point is you can't really heal. You can't go through the other healing processes sometimes without actually doing this. So I want to make sure that people can find you and connect with you. So you're elizakingsford.com. And
That's right.
Is there anywhere else people can find you?
Yeah, elizakingsford.com is a great place. There's a lot of free resources there. And then Instagram, Eliza Kingsford.
Awesome.
Probably should be in more places, but those are the good ones.
Awesome. Well, I hope you can come back sometime. We can dive into this further. And I really deeply appreciate you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. This is great.
If you enjoyed this video, you need to tune in to this video next. Then make sure to hit the subscribe button so you get notified as soon as a new episode drops. I'm excited to see you there and dive deeper with you on your skin healing journey.